Okay, would you like to share something with us this morning, Guru Maharaj?
Well, one thing new is that we have a new website for my discourse. It's swami.org. So if you go to swami.org, you will see a whole new site with all of my talks. It's very well organized, very nicely done by Guru Nishtan Brindaranya. Harijan Das, I know, was very involved in that. Perhaps some others as well. Much appreciated. And that replaces the previous site. It was called Shabda Brahman, which was done earlier by some other devotees. So this is there, and if there's anything that you find, any of you, that is problematic, then you can let Guru Nishta know in this interim period, and we'll adjust it. But it is live, so I'm very happy, very pleased with it. I hope you will be as well. That's a new development, and otherwise, I've been busy. We received 128 bales of hay recently, and we've been stacking them the last few days. It's been good exercise. Today should be the last day, but all's well here at Audarium and in Madhuvan as well also. So let's go ahead and take the questions.
Okay, sounds good. So the first question is from Braj Sundari. This was actually for last week, but I missed it. So here we go. Braj says, in Java-Dharma, in the chapter called Prameya sakti-tattva, Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes that cit-sakti, jiva-sakti, and maya-sakti are three aspects of svarupa-sakti, and hladini, samvit, and sandhini are three manifestations of svarupa-sakti, and that these three manifestations act on the three aspects. Perhaps it is my problem with understanding it in English, but could you explain it more, please?
Well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statement there is based on Svetashvatara Upanishad, Parasya Shakti Vividai Vishriyate. That basically means that the Godhead has Shakti that manifests in multifarious ways. He's imbued with Shakti. And so if we look at the personification of the Shakti, for example, the primal Godhead is Krishna, and the primal, he's the Shakti-man, and then the Shakti that corresponds with him in the primal position is Radha. So all the Shaktis come, in a sense, from the primal Shakti. One could look at it like that. And so, for example, we have Durga is a name for Radha, and Durga is also a name for the maya-sakti. All of the goddesses, if you will, have Saraswati, Durga, and so on. They all have the material manifestation and a spiritual manifestation. So I'm giving this as an example by which you can see that from the primal Shakti, Radha, we also have the maya-sakti as manifesting, a diversification of it in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's perspective. And then there's and so she's a personification, the full sense of the Svarupa-sakti. And now, that said, of course, the jiva-sakti is a little different, because the jiva-sakti is really a vibhinamsa, or partial, separated, vibhinamsa means separated, an atomic manifestation of the Godhead. It's manifest by the Tatastha Shakti, and sometimes therefore it's referred to as Tatastha Shakti. But at any rate, what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying there is that this original Shakti, this svarupa-sakti, that is constituted of sandhini, which means an existential feature, samvit, cognitive feature, and hladini, a experiential experiential feature. Experience could be good or bad as it manifests in the spiritual world. It's union and separation, but it's all ananda. So when we take those three, sandhini, samvit, and hladini, these are the three aspects of the svarupa-sakti. Now, when that svarupa-sakti, or original primal Shakti, is manifest as the Tatastha Shakti, the jiva, then the jiva is constituted of sat, chit, and ananda. Sat means existential, chit means cognitive, and ananda means experiential. And by its nature, then its experience is joyful. So ananda. So sat, chit, and ananda are atomic, if you will, or partial manifestations of the existential, cognitive, and experiential features of the svarupa-sakti, sandhini, samvit, hladini. So you have the partial manifestation of them, and then you have the distorted manifestation of them, which is the maya-sakti, which is asat, achit, and nirananda. So this way he's tracing out, if you will, this idea from the Svetashvatara Upanishad that there's from one Shakti, so many Shaktis come, by way of speaking about the kind of the three principal Shaktis, Svarupa-sakti, maya-sakti, and jiva-sakti, in terms of their commonality, if you will. Again, to put it in further in English terms, Svarupa-sakti is existential. So there's realms that correspond with it, and they're eternal. Maya-sakti, by contrast, is asat, or asandhini. Sat means existence, and so does sandhini. So asat means there are realms existential, but they're here today, they're gone tomorrow, right? The cognitive feature of that inner spiritual world, that knowing, when it's that Shakti is manifest as the Maya Shakti, it's achit. So there's unknowing here, right? Avidya is the basis of the material existence, causes avidya at the root, ignorance, unknowing. And in the internal spiritual world, if you will, realm, you have joy, hladini. In the material world, we have suffering, nirananda. And in between these two, then, we can go from one side to the other, is the jiva-sakti. And it's atomic in its capacity, in its existence, in its cognizance, and in its joy. So it's sat, chit, ananda. We would say that, I have said before, sandhini, hladini, and samvit is like sat, chit, ananda on steroids, if you will. So that is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is stating. That verse from Svetashvatara Upanishad says further, it says, Parasya Shakti Vividai Vishvite Svabhavika Jnana Balakriya Cha Svabhavika, Jnana, Bala, Kriya. Jnana, Bala, Kriya. These three can also be identified with samvit, hladini, and sandhini. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Krishna Kanaya. She couldn't be on the call today, but she sent a question in. She says, Dandavat pranams, dear Guru Maharaj. In the Bible, humans are asked to be good stewards of the earth. Is there a similar mention in the Vedic literature that we are protectors, caretakers of our environment? What is our ideal relationship to Mother Bhumi? We are always takers, aren't we?
Well, we are takers in a conditioned life, material conditioned life. We're exploiting the world because of identification with the microcosm of it, which is our body-mind complex. And that identification causes us to feel unfulfilled. And so we reach out to the material nature and try to acquire to overcome the sense of lack of fulfillment by adding things to ourselves. Of course, that's counterproductive. And by taking, we end up with less, right? We owe more. And so the idea in the Vedic text is to turn inward, right? To find oneself, the fullness of oneself in relation to matter and in consideration of our connection as eternal servants of Bhagavan, where the full sense of our fulfillment is found, right? And so in conditioned life, yes, we're takers, but we're taught in the scriptures that we're not meant to be takers, we're meant to be givers, right? And so by giving ourselves to Bhagavan in service, how do we do that? Well, among other things, that those sense objects that we are in touch with, or the world, right? We contact it and engage with the sense objects through our senses only for the pleasure of Krishna. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevana Bhakti Ruchite. As Narad says, bhakti is using our senses for the service of Krishna's senses. Now we use those senses of ours, how? In relation to sense objects. So the whole idea within bhakti, within the idea that we should, with our body, mind, and self, serve Bhagavan, is included, as I'm explaining it, the idea that we shouldn't take from the world simply for the sake of our body and mind, but we should take only as much as is necessary to maintain the body and mind as it is fully engaged in Bhagavan's service. So I don't think it's said in any particular verse that humans are the caretakers of nature, but it's given within that understanding. We shouldn't be exploiting material nature, but seeing it as one of the Shaktis of Bhagavan and connecting it with him through service to Bhagavan, and thereby spiritualizing, in a sense, the world, treading lightly on it. The whole idea of taking from the world is thought to be objectionable and allowed, if you will, only within the limits of, as I say, what is necessary for preserving the body and mind in the service of Bhagavan. So it's a given, it's packed in there, built into the whole concept that we should, that humans are the stewards of of nature. There's the doctrine of ahimsa, nonviolence. I was asked the other day about what to pray. I think by Gayatri, when you wake up, I gave the prayer for waking up in the morning that I should not step on. I pray that my steps on the earth will only be in the service of Bhagavan and so forth. So, and you see this practically, historically speaking, that while in Europe, Descartes famously distinguished humans in his mind from the rest of nature, including all of its creatures, by the idea that, well, I think, in other words, I think what he meant is I'm cognitive of my existence in a way that he thought animals, trees, and so on, and plants and whatnot were not, and therefore I am, cogito ergo sum. And in thinking along these lines, he kind of identified humans as conscious beings, and the rest of nature, beings and all included, being unconscious and soulless. Much of the soul is consciousness, though they didn't have a soul. Of course, he conflated mind with soul, with Atma, if you will, if you want to use Atma as a translation for soul. Soul is kind of an English word that is not very well defined in the Bible at all. It was later only through the Platonic, Plato and Aristotle, two different conceptions of the soul were developed, for example, within Catholicism. So you're not going to draw it from the Bible itself. I say in this regard that, do you believe in the soul? I say, do you believe in consciousness? The latter is kind of a silly question. So ours is that we define consciousness. Everybody believes in consciousness. We define it in a particular way, and for good reason. But somehow I got there with regard to the question about, were we still on the question about nature and exploit? So I was saying historically. So historically speaking, in Europe, this insight of Descartes, which loomed rather large, was the beginning really of the environmental crisis that we experience in the world today. Because the church then, if you will, gave a license to the pillaging of nature, which previously was thought to be sacred. It took the sacred out of nature. So the shamans and other religious pagan sects, they all worshipped nature in some way or another, posited gods and goddesses, fairies, or whatever may be the case. But it was a culture that, comparatively speaking, comparatively to what happened in Europe with the Industrial Revolution, Scientific Revolution, which was all blessed by the church at the beginning, although later now it's become the nemesis of the church, but it was blessed by the church to rape and pillage the world, if you will. Now, this didn't happen, and this was all biblical, was thought, but this didn't happen in India, where it was also thought that humans were the vehicle. Human life was the vehicle through which consciousness fully manifests, but it didn't conclude. The Hindus didn't conclude. The Sanatanists didn't conclude that animals didn't have souls, or the consciousness was only manifested in humans, and so forth. And so it was a very deeply theistic and theologically rich culture that at the same time was rich in terms of its sense of the world, and worshipful. The rivers are worshipped, the mountains are worshipped. The whole of the Varnashram is the positing of gods and goddesses behind every feature of nature and making them worshipable. So you worship the god, the goddess. This isn't separate by any means from worship of the river. And is it kind of a worship means kind of a, in this sense, kind of a, in the Varnashram sense, a gratefulness, grateful to the river. We're grateful to the wind. We're grateful to the sun, because our senses, which are again and mind, which are the microcosm of the macrocosm of the world, they're dependent in terms of their functioning on the macrocosm. So for me to see, we need light. We need light. Sun provides the light, and so we show, Surya Namaskar. We show gratitude to the sun as we rise in the morning, and it rises. This is a very beautiful concept, and it was a worship of nature, or a loving approach to nature, which I often say, if you love someone, they'll tell you all their secrets. So nature tells its secret that it has a soul, and it's you. That's what comes out of the Varnashram, which is a very worshipful orientation towards nature, that in its culmination, in its real ultimate fruit, the Varnashram, the karma marg, brings one to Gyan, which is contemplative life and knowledge of and experience of the self. So if you approach nature properly, she shows you that she has a soul, and it's you. And you, within all of the world, are the thing that most resembles God. So you're worshipful as well as an Atma, being consciousness like a God is. Of course, your worshipful object is the God himself as well. So here you have, a very pagan-like, if you want to use like the European term, orientation towards nature, that at the same time is very theologically developed, not only in comparison to the pagan traditions of Europe, but also in comparison to Christianity. It's a much more complex and rich theology, if you ask me, and I think it's objective. Look at the theology and the philosophy of the Bhagavatam compared to the theology and the philosophy of the Bible. I mean, to be generous, I would say that the Bible is like a partial manifestation of what's being described theologically. The concept of God and the Dharma of humanity, ultimately Nitya Dharma, to worship God through acts of devotion. This is the Bible's kind of like a manifestation of bhakti in a different culture. That's doesn't bring out as much of the richness that the Bhagavatam does in terms of the various faces of the Godhead and the ultimate fountainhead, or the primal face of Bhagavan Sri Krishna. So there's a lot to say in comparison to the one statement of the Bible that humans are stewards of nature in our Vaishnava culture. The idea there is well supported and more and reasoned about and so on and so forth. The limited way in which this was thought about in Christianity has not been strong enough to push back, if you will. And therefore, there is an environmental crisis, and even many Christians today are part of the environmental crisis in their thinking and in their actions. So, what else? Another question.
Guru Maharaj, I had a follow-up thought. You said something that really kind of hit me in a new way. You were saying how, first of all, that the basis of Varnashram is gratitude, which I've never thought of it like that. In the West, we tend to see the so-called caste system in this very kind of harsh negative light, that it's this like oppressive force that keeps people in these little boxes. But that idea that it's actually all based on gratitude, and the structure is trying to teach people basically how to be grateful, is like a very cool idea to me. And then a quick other thought that I had that really blew my mind too was that you said that when you love somebody, they will tell you all their secrets. So there's a ton of all these new studies about gratitude and how gratitude enables you to like have this self knowledge and like self-understanding that is really hard to access otherwise. And so I thought of it how even in the context of psychology, that's true, that when you kind of like love yourself or you have gratitude for life actually shows itself even in the secular sense in this broader scope to you. So it's like really relevant what you're saying, like it's hitting me like how universal it is.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Yes.
Anyway, the next question is from Gunjan Sharma. She says, Dandavad Pranam Maharaj, thank you so much for your kind mercy. How does one maintain a mood of being humble, yet not underperforming as per one's capacity? As sometimes acting in one's capacity may require leadership qualities.
Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura gave a famous lecture, and it was entitled later, More Humble Than a Blade of Grass. He gave this lecture from his asana on the day in which his appearance in the world was being celebrated by his disciples. And as such, there were many praises of him, flowery words, and gifts offered, and so on and so forth. And so in the midst of this, he gave this famous lecture, and he said, how does this correspond, me sitting up here, accepting all this praise and honor, with the mandate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Trinadapi Sunichena, that one should be more humble grass. And of course, he went on to explain that I'm only sitting here because it's been asked of me. It's a service that I've been called upon to do. I'm accepting it, this honor on behalf of Bhagavan. And so he went on to give a dynamic understanding of humility. So humility before whom? Should we be humble before the tiger, the Bengali tiger that's attacking us in the forest, and just fold our hands? We have to. Should we be humble in a overt sense if Vaishnavas are attacked or our guru is vilified? So no, but yes, but the shape or the form in which the humility expresses itself is dynamic, and it may look on the surface to be other than humility, but that's very much, but it is an expression of humility, because it's humility for what, for who, before whom? Humility before Bhagavan to do his bidding, and his bidding may call upon Hanuman to, for example, to jump across, to Lanka and destroy the kingdom of Ravana, and so forth. So where's the humility of Hanuman, right? So the humility is that he's doing what Bhagavan wants. I mean, you can have humility independent in one sense of serving Bhagavan. Just like you can if you want to give up the exploitation, the taking that we're speaking about earlier, well, you can stop taking. And that takes a certain shape, right? But you could also give in service to he whom the world belongs to, aspects of the world that I come in touch with. Now, which is more comprehensive in terms of overcoming this, the enjoying ego, the taking ego. Well, it's one thing to stop taking, it's another thing to serve, right? that is much more to ask of us, and as such, it is much more comprehensive of an approach to converting, or doing away with, I should say, doing away with the enjoying ego. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura also said that humility is absence of the enjoying ego. So that means the presence of the serving ego, the development of that I'm a servant. And a servant can express himself or herself in any number of ways of which I've just discussed, which are more directly, obviously, connected to devotional service. But as a householder, we may live in the world, we may have a job, for example, that requires us to, present ourselves, push ourselves forward to some extent. Now, in this connection, my Guru Maharaj used to say that, amongst the householders who are doctors, lawyers, or they may be politicians, or they may be a factory worker, or whatever may be the case, they should be the best at that in their field. And seeing their proficiency in their particular field, they'll stand out amongst others. And what will be the reason behind their philosophical perspective, which then they can explain. So he wanted his disciples who had worldly responsibilities and desires and so forth, who weren't contemplatives, to assert themselves in the world and be the best in their field. So that the best doctors are the devotees of Krishna. The best lawyers are, the most honest politicians are the ones who are actually devotees. So there's a strong sense in our paribar of this with regard to how to convert worldliness, if you will, into otherworldliness. So it's a conceptual orientation. But if you can catch that, then you can be ferocious, even in the business world, if you will. Another example, probably used to say, we are lambs at home and lions in the, what did he say? Lambs at home, lions, in the world. He was talking about preaching. So a lion doesn't seem humble. A lamb seems very humble comparatively. At home, one thing, but in relation to the world, well, it is aggressive. We have to push back and so forth. But our purpose has to be all ultimately for Bhagavan. So as I said, I think I've said, many times, the householder can serve in a minimal way by purifying their occupation, if you will, through funding that comes from that, funding, monetary remuneration that comes from that, by using such funds for Vaishnava purposes and so forth. So those are some thoughts on that. Hope it's helpful.
Harijan has a follow-up on this one.
And that's Guru Maharaj. I just recently read something from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, and he says that there are two ways of like direct approach and indirect. Like direct is like positive glorification of devotion, and indirect is like opposition, I would say. And he says this opposition creates like some unbalanced situation, but it's necessary to discern the truth. So like my question is kind of like where to apply this like indirect thing, or where it is good time for it, or where is not good time.
What Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura is talking about is, for example, how the Bhagavatam as a text works, how the Gita as a text works. If you look at these books carefully, you'll see what their central subject is Ananya Bhakti, Uttam Bhakti, pure Bhakti, unalloyed Bhakti. That's what it's about. So sometimes it speaks directly about the virtues of unalloyed bhakti. And sometimes these texts speak indirectly about the virtues of unalloyed bhakti by comparing them to other paths, karma yoga, jnana yoga, yoga mixed with bhakti, or as may be the case. So when the Gita is speaking about different paths, it's really speaking about one path, either directly or indirectly. So we glorify Bhagavan and bhakti directly, and we may glorify Bhagavan indirectly by speaking about the philosophical problems with Advaita Vedanta, Nirvishesh. You find Ramanuja, Madhva, Bhalava, and so forth, one after another, with these dissertations, text after text after text, refuting the idea that Bhagavan doesn't have an eternal form. This is indirectly glorifying. So that's what's, I think he's primarily speaking about. But it relates to the previous question and answer as well. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next question is from, it's actually an anonymous question. The person says, I heard Srila Narayana Maharaja say that Kirtan without a madhyam bhakta, with a connection to svarupa-sakti, is like barking of dogs. How do you think about the statement?
Well, I think that I wouldn't have put it like that, but there is some truth to what he's saying. That I would have put it differently, and that is that we should conduct Kirtan under the auspices and with the blessings of a Vaishnava with real standing. And this is recommended throughout. We may not have the standing of a superior Vaishnava, but we should do Kirtan under their auspices, which would mean that our Kirtan will be philosophically informed with proper sambandha gyan, and therefore it will be fruitful. To the extent to which our Kirtan is not informed by sambandha gyan, we may, for example, be making namaparad. So in Bengal, during the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Bhakti Vinod and Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhakti Vinod Thakur was concerned that there were plenty of people doing Kirtan, but they didn't have sambandha gyan. And therefore they were thinking, we'll do Krishna Kirtan today, tomorrow let's do Kali Kirtan, and so forth and so on. So there is a, without the sambandha gyan, without knowing, for example, the 10 offenses, then they're susceptible to that, and then they won't make progress. So it's an offense to think that the name of Kali, for example, is equal to the name of Krishna in terms of Kirtan. And neither does Kali ask for Kirtan. Kali doesn't say, whoever chants my name, Krishna says that. Mat-chita mat-kata prana, right? Katayantas chamam nityam, statements like this. Krishna is the advocate. Vishnu of Kirtan is a limb of bhakti. Anyway, it's not for Shiva. It's not for, Shiva maybe, perhaps, yes, but it's not for Brahma. It's not for Indra. It's not for Chandra, Kali, and so forth. You could do, but anyway, and to think they're the same is an offense. So that when the sambandha gyan is lacking, which would be the siksha coming from the connection with real devotees, and what I mean by their chanting under their auspices, under their direction, that kind of kirtan that would be fruitful. Kirtan outside of that may not be, or will not be to the same extent. Srila Maharaj, Pujapad Srila Maharaj used to say, well, if we don't receive the mantra from a proper guru, then it's like firing blanks, shooting a gun that only has blanks, something like that. Because to take it a little further, one of the nam-aparads, another one is to disobey the guru or to avoid the guru, to disrespect the guru. So if we don't have a proper guru, we're under whose blessing, with whose blessing we're chanting the name, then arguably we're committing that offense. And so by nam-aparad, how will you make progress? That's how I would say that this is what Narayana Maharaja is talking about. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Gayatri.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
So the other day, I was speaking with a Gaudiya Vaishnava whom I consider well-versed in the scriptures. And he said that on the scale of loving relationships with Krishna, Vatsalya is higher than Sakya. Maybe I've misunderstood and this is correct, but I want to check with you, is this correct? And if not, why is it that people within the same lineage have different conceptions of these things?
Yes, there's a way to argue for both. And I think the more prominent idea is that because the essential characteristics of Shantarasa are also present in Dasya, plus something more. Dasya is superior to Shanta. And because the characteristics of Dasya are present in Sakya, along with something more, therefore Sakya is more developed, if you will, or brings one more in touch with Bhagavan than Dasya. And because the ingredients of Sakya are present in Vatsalya, plus something more, Vatsalya offers more intimacy, and then to Madhurya. This is the general way in which it's described. And Rupa Goswami describes it like this in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He gives also the example of you have earth, water, fire, air, ether. In ether, you have sound, but in air, you have sound and touch. In fire, you have sound, touch, and sight, because you can see the fire. In water, you have sound, touch, sight, and taste. And in earth, you have sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. So also, earth is more full. He gives this kind of example. Now, that doesn't mean that in Madhurya Rasa would be the earth in this comparison, and Shanta Rasa would be the ether, right? The other end of the spectrum, right? But because that doesn't mean that one who has Madhurya Rasa has all the other rasas, but it has aspects of the other rasas, but it's its own rasa, it's its own self. It's not that someone in Madhurya Rasa has all the rasas. So anyway, that's an interesting point as an aside. So this is the typical explanation, and the Vaishnava you're referring to has probably given that. However, that said, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in his chapter on Sakya Rasa, Rupa Goswami says at the end that there's also a case to be made for Sakya being superior to Vatsalya, Dasya, and Shanta, right? And he says that the reason for this is that in Shanta, in Sakya-rasa, unlike Vatsalya and unlike Dasya and Shanta, the basis of this rasa is equality between Bhagavan and the devotee. So how the Bhagavan feels towards the devotee and how the devotee feels towards Bhagavan, they are the same. It's not the case in Vatsalya. How Mother Yasoda feels towards Krishna is not the way he feels towards her, right? There's some difference there, right? Which gets in the way of the union, right? The likeness, the sameness, the something like that. Similarly in Dasya, the Dasya devotee feels one way towards Bhagavan and Bhagavan feels another way. It's love. Both ways are expressions of love, but there's a difference. You can think of it yourself. How you will feel towards your children will be one thing, be different than how they feel towards you, whereas how you feel towards your close friends and you, it's the same. They feel towards you just like you feel towards them. So because this is a central quality of Sakya, some reason that Sakya is superior to Vatsalya. Now, when we say superior, of course, they're all perfect. So we shouldn't have a mundane conception. One is better than the other necessarily. What's best, Chaitanya Charitamrita says, is what's best for you, for each devotee. He gives the subjective. He says, well, we can make a case that objectively speaking, Madhurya affords more intimacy. Still, the best rasa is the one that each devotee feels themselves, right? So now, while there's a case that can be made for the superiority of Sakya over Vatsalya or vice versa, if we go from Rupa Goswami to Jiva Goswami, Jiva Goswami's book that kind of parallels Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is his Bhakti Sandarbha, his treatise, Sandarbha, on Bhakti, right? Which is what Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is. And Jiva Goswami wrote, of course, a commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That's very important. But in his Bhakti Sandarbha, while describing the gradation, if you will, of different rasas, Jiva Goswami holds that Sakya rasa is superior to Vatsalya rasa. And he is thought to be in Madhurya rasa, in Manjari Bhav, but he worshipped Krishna Balaram as a child. It seems to have stuck with him. So you can find amongst all the Goswamis and commentators who are in Manjari Bhav or thought to be in Manjari Bhav, in Rupa Goswami, you can find repeatedly statements of affinity also for the Sakya rasa. In fact, he goes so far as to say that the Kanta Bhav, the Madhurya rasa in Braj, is mixed with Sakya. This is his own statement, is mixed with Sakya. So he has some affinity for Sakya on that basis. And of course, in the Braj Leela, it's the Madhurya rasa and the Sakya rasa that is more, much more closely related to, affiliated with, involved in the romantic life of Krishna, which is the essence of Braj. How much is this Vatsalya rasa involved in the romantic life of Krishna? It serves as opposition to the romantic life, although they would all like Krishna to marry Radha. They have to follow the Dharma, and according to his astrological chart, this is not going to be good because he's going to be gone when he's, just just becoming an adolescent and leave the village. Then he has he has a date with Dharma, right, to defeat the demons. So how could he marry the gopis and Radha? They have to have somebody here. They have to have a coward villager. So although Vatsalya would also, Radharani, Yasoda wants Krishna to marry Radharani. Still, she can't allow that, right? So they serve as opposition, which indirectly is facilitating the parakia, of course. But in Sakirasa, there's a direct amongst the Narmasakas, for example, in the romantic life. And so here you have, within Sakirasa, there are divisions, there are different types of Sakirasa. So when you look at the Priya Narmasaka, then this class of Sakirasa devotees definitely, even Rupa Goswami will wholly agree, if affords greater intimacy with Bhagavan than Vatsalya. Therefore, it exceeds in excellence the Vatsalya, which goes up to, there's a gradation, Sneha, Man, Pranay, Rag, Anurag. So Vatsalya go up to Rag, but this Narmasaka Bhav goes up to Anurag, Mahabhav also. So these are not the features, these two of Vatsalya Rasa. So there's a devotee who's spoken to, he has the general idea, and that is the general, but if you look a little deeper, there's a case that can be made for the superiority of Sakya in general, and without a doubt, there cannot be any disagreement if you study it carefully. The Narmasaka's Sakya Bhav is more rich, if you will, affords greater intimacy with Bhagavan than Vatsalya. So, not everybody is as well studied in the subject matters. What he has said or she has said is a general teaching. Now you know how to raise your hand and say, yes, but you have to listen to this a few times. But okay.
Yes, I will have to listen a few times. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. Nice question.
Okay, the next question is from Krishna Sevaka Prabhu.
Please accept my obeisances, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
My question is a little convoluted, so please bear with me. I'll try to keep it short. I've experienced glimpses of Achinta Beta Beta Tattva where there's the oneness and the separation with Krishna. Glimpses. But I don't understand why he wants me. It feels to me like he's reached to me from his world to my world here originally through the devotees and Sangha and all that. And yet I have, I'm in separation from him, and I don't know why he wants me about everybody that he has already in his life. Why would he want me in his life? I'm grateful and everything, but I don't understand why.
Krishna, thank you for the question. Where's the Kastuba Mani? The Mani means jewels. I don't know how you would translate. I think some people translate it into lapis, but anyway, there's a Kastuba Mani, and this jewel, the Bhagavatam tells, this jewel represents all jivas. He's wearing it around his neck. So all the jivas are dear to Bhagavan. They're all partial manifestations of himself. And when they are connected with him through bhakti, then through the bodies that correspond with that, the spiritual bodies, which have senses, then Krishna plays out that much further his unlimited desire to enjoying capacity through the senses of that devotee in the Leela. So in this sense, they serve as potential further instruments, if you will, through which Bhagavan's unlimited capacity to taste rasa can be experienced. His prema is full, but the nature of that prema is that it's ever increasing. So we, as potential devotees, rightfully understood, we are the servants of Bhagavan, Krishna, jiva-sakti, Krishna nityadas. Krishna nityadas, we are the servants of Krishna. When that is realized, then through our senses, Bhagavan is experiencing, is facilitated, I should say, in terms of his unlimited enjoying capacity. So that's one way, to look at it, if you will. But again, if you just take the idea that the jivas manifest from the Paramatma, so they are, he is their maker, so they are seeking to meet the maker. And but here, look at it like this: the Paramatma manifests the jivas. Why? It's just out of joy. The world, there is such thing as the maya-sakti. There is a such thing as the jiva-sakti. They're aspects of Bhagavan, his shaktis. Paramatma manifests the maya-sakti and the jiva-sakti for the purpose of interacting with the jivas who are inherent within him. He manifests them just like Krishna manifests as Radha. Why? To interact with her, by which his ecstasy, his ananda can be increased. In other words, if you have sugar, it's sweet, right? But it can't taste itself. So Bhagavan is sweet, but he can't taste himself as fully. But he manifests his sweetness externally and interacts with the sweetness. That is a relationship between Radha and Krishna. Achintya Bheda Bheda. She's one with him and different from him. So on another level, the Paramatma manifests the jivas and the maya-sakti as well, for the purpose of interacting with them. Of course, the problem is they're small, and the maya-sakti is big collectively, and so it covers them. So he has to avatar, he has to descend to sort them out, bring them out, excavate them from their predicament, and so forth. This is his love for them. He manifests bhakti in the world by manifesting devotees and so on and so forth. This is the idea. So he cares about the jivas. He manifests them for joy, and there's joy for the one by becoming many. When the one becomes many, think of it yourself. You're in a room by yourself. Well, if you could manifest others, it wouldn't be as full as you because you're manifesting them, but a semblance of you, and you could interact with them. This is the idea. Does that help?
Yes, it does, Guru Maharaj. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
there's just a minute left. We have like 4 more questions, but we could save them for next week.
Could the fact that Purnitai distributes Madhurya and Sakya be proof of the supremacy of the two rasas? Well, Kishore asks, we emphasize the fact that they are the prominent rasas of Gaudiya Vaishnavism because Gaur and Nityananda are absorbed in Madhurya and Sakya, respectively. Yes, so if you want to say Gaudiya Vaishnavism is superior to the Vallabha Shuddhadvaiti Vaishnav school, where Vatsalya is very central, then you could make a case that Sakya-rasa is superior because Gaudiya Vaishnava is superior. But I mean, I think the way in which I answered Gayatri on that is probably a better approach. Haribo, I will ask a question next week. Thank you for the question. Sadhvi, oh my goodness. Let's see. Can you speak on Balaram? Why Balaram doesn't fight in Kurukshetra if he's a Kshatriya? Why did he not participate in the war? Well, because he was affiliated with Duryodhana. Duryodhana was very, let's say you love someone. And you have another friend. However, as it turns out, the person that you love doesn't get along with your friend. He sees things in your friend that just are real problematic. Now, you hear that from the one you love, but he's your friend. You don't see him in that way. Your interaction with him is different. So unless you have the experience that your lover does, it's hard for you to get, on board when the person you love is criticizing that. You're able to find excuses for him and so on and so forth. So this is very practical human psychology of love. So Balaram loves Krishna. And Duryodhana loves Balaram, but he didn't like Krishna very much. Now, of course, you could say, well, because Balaram only loves Krishna, how can he love Duryodhana if Duryodhana doesn't love Krishna? But this is Leela. So in Leela, Balaram's a little sympathetic to Duryodhana. He's not ultimately for him over Krishna, but he's a little sympathetic. And Duryodhana wanted the war, and despite all the diplomacy by which the dispute never was made to resolve the dispute, it wasn't destined to happen, and the war was destined to happen for other reasons. So Balaram, this is part of the reason, his affinity for Duryodhana and for Krishna. He likes them both, and he didn't want to get in there and take sides to such an extreme extent of being a warrior and so forth. And of course, beyond that, many things are accomplished in the context of a Leela. Balaram is a manifestation of Krishna. So Krishna is, in that sense, not different than Balaram. And he had another purpose to fulfill at the same time, which was the installing of Sutta Goswami on the Vyasasan as the speaker of the Bhagavatam. So Balaram went south, and there he dealt with Ramaharshana and put his son. Ramaharshana was offensive, was a false speaker, if you will, of the Bhagavatam and the Puranas, and he put his son in his place and gave us the this way Balaram gave us the Bhagavatam that we have today. Sutta Goswami speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, just like Nityananda Prabhu gave us Chaitanya Charitamrita by blessing Krishna's Kaviraj to go to Vrindavan, and there he would find his wealth and we have Chaitanya Bhagavat because of Nityananda Prabhu, because he told Vrindavan Das in his heart that he should write such a book and so forth. This is his role. So he had so Krishna is now different than Balaram. Krishna had something else to accomplish at the same time. That's a short way answer to think about that. Then I see, how do you recommend we meditate on Jula Nyatra? Well, Jula Yatra is meditation is a deep thing. Typically, Jula Yatra is celebrated by putting Radha and Krishna on a swing and having a festival. So, if you were to meditate, you'd meditate on internally on that festival and the Leela descriptions of that. And in the context of that meditation, see yourself as a participant relative to your rasa. But that's not so easy to do. So, therefore, externally, festivals are created. Radha and Krishna are put on swing, flowers are offered, Kirtan is sung, and so forth. What this is a picture, external picture through our senses that it corresponds to some extent to the internal meditative experience of that world and that realm and that particular Leela. So, some acharyas, we have another question. Some acharyas of other paribar think we should have only one Diksha Guru and take Harinam and Gayatri from him. We see that our lineage does not think so because Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada had 2 gurus. But do you think we should designate one of them as priority and think of him as the main one? First of all, I don't think that Chaitanya Charitamrita states that Harinam is independent of Diksha. Harinam, the name of Hari, is non-different from Krishna himself. So he can enlighten anyone independent of Diksha. Still, what he has recommended is that we accept Diksha and the mantra, and by honoring the Guru, then we're in a position to take advantage of the holy name of Hari. So there's a good case that can be made that Harinam doesn't require Diksha. But if we were to take advantage of Harinam, we should accept Diksha and the mantra. Now, previously I talked about having the blessing of a devotee to chant, and we should, and so on and so forth. But there is a distinction made between Diksha and Nam Kirtan. People do Nam Kirtan without Diksha. With regard, so I don't think there's much of a case that can be made that one must accept Diksha and Harinam from the same person. Typically, that's going to be the case, but there are other instances in which, for example, one accepts Harinam, the blessing, let's say, to chant the holy name from a guru, and later accepts Diksha from another guru because that guru's passed away. What are you going to do then? So there's no like hard and fast rule, scriptural rule, that whatever guru gives you the blessing, his blessing or her blessing to chant the holy name under his or her auspices, must be the guru that you accept Diksha from. There's no rule like that. So people could say whatever they want, but there's no rule like that. And we give a practical example. What if that guru who gives you Harinam or that blessing departs? Then you can't take Diksha from anybody because she's not there. No. And also the explanation of Chaitanya Charitamrita is that while the Diksha guru should be one, Siksha guru may be a plural. Because one person gives you the mantra, but you could take Siksha from others. So in the case of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, he took Diksha from one person, and he took Harinam from. He had the blessing of Bhaktivinoda to chant Harinam, but it's not that he didn't have the blessing to chant Harinam from Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. It's like if you say, well, my father was a pure Vaishnava, lived in his home, we chanted Hare Krishna from my whole life, and he told me to take Diksha from so-and-so. Does that mean that's a problem? No, it's not at all. The idea of taking Harinam initiation, I don't. But Gorkishore Das Babaji, for that matter, told Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura that you will realize your swarup in the syllables of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So even though he was chanting Hare Krishna prior to meeting his Gorkishore Das Babaji, you could say Gorkishore Das Babaji gave him Harinam as well. You can make that argument if need be. But the question is, do you think we should designate one of them gurus as priority and think of him as the main one? I don't think so. I think that they're both equally important. One time, one of my godbrothers who had taken sannyas from Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj set up an altar, and on the altar he didn't put Gorkishore Das Babaji's picture there because Sridhar Maharaj, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, Guru Maharaj had been teaching or emphasizing that the way in which Bhaktisiddhanta configured the Guru Parampara was in terms of substantial contributors. Not that others weren't contributors, but they were substantial. Just like in science, if you want to make a line, from centuries ago to today, you can't name every scientist, but you're going to name the Newtons, Copernicus, whatever, Newton, Einstein, the ones that really stand out and have made major contributions. They're all good, they're all bona fide, but so he drew a line like that. And in some cases, there was an emphasis on a Siksha guru of someone, like for example, in the case of Bhakti Vinod, who was initiated by Bihari Goswami. Bhaktisiddhanta reasoned that, well, we see things in Bhakti Vinod that weren't in Bihari Goswami, but they were in Jagannath Das Babaji, who was a Siksha guru. So we'll draw the line to, without disregarding Bihari Goswami, we draw the line to a more significant, substantial contributor. So anyway, my godbrother reasoned, well, what was the contribution of Gorkishore anyway? So he took him off the altar. But when Sridhar Maharaj heard that, he became furious. He said, and then the disciple humbly asked, well, what was the contribution of Gorkishore? And then Sridhar Maharaj replied, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. That was his contribution. So, but practically speaking, it's a fact that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura dedicated his life to carrying out the mission that was conceived of by Bhaktivinoda Thakur to spread Krishna consciousness around the world. I mean, Bhakti Gorkishore said, don't bother with the preaching, it's just going to get in the way, do bhajan. And Bhaktivinoda said, you got to go and preach. And so what to do? He had two gurus. But he honored them both equally. We honor them equally. They have they've made different contributions. They were moved by Bhagavan in different ways to contribute. So, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did tell us to identify ourselves as members of the Bhakti Vinod Parivar. Bhakti Vinod is connected to the Nityananda Parivar and Gorkishore to the Advaita Parivar. So in one sense, there's maybe some emphasis on the Nityananda Parivar, but as conceived of by Bhakti Vinod, I mean, he's starting it with Bhakti Vinod. So those are some thoughts on that. I hope that's helpful. I see a long question here. Today's world.
Can I quickly ask a follow-up first?
Yeah.
So in our parivar, would you then say that it's not necessarily so that Diksha is like the more important initiation? I'm just asking this in terms of what you just said earlier. That.
Well, there's different ways to think about that. And what's the most important guru? If you have more than one, Well, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj gave the answer. The one that helped you the most. This is the most important guru. It is not based on the formalities, but whoever helps you the most, however you feel is the most significant spiritual figure in your life. That's the most important guru. If you have more than one, the plurality of gurus. So there you go. But he made the case that when some of Prabhupada's disciples who had received Harinam from Prabhupada, but he passed away, were then in a position to take initiation mantra diksha from one of their godbrothers. So in this case, Sridhar Maharaj made the case that Harinam is more important than mantra, because Chaitanya Charitamrita says that by mantra you can get free from samsara, and by gnam you can attain the feet of Krishna. So the mantra retires at a certain point in terms of its efficacy, and Harinam continues on. So he made the case like that. Now you can make an opposite case, that diksha is more important, because without the diksha, for all intents and purposes, the vast majority of people are not going to be able to fully take advantage of Harinam. Therefore, it's more important. There are exceptions to that. That's the norm, and that's the norm that's mentioned and underscored in Bhakti Sandarbha. But it's not necessarily the case. There can be exceptional persons, like a Bhakti Vinod, for example. Yes.
Yeah, it really struck me. I never thought of it before, but the fact that we get an initiated like name during the Harinam initiation is really substantial, actually, because that's supposed to signify that we're like a new person, right? And I never thought of it, but that's like unusual, because other lineages don't give the Harinam initiation.
Yeah, some do, some don't. Yeah. So we have a question, one more question here that I can see. Everywhere, it's so much easier to connect and compete with people. Krishna consciousness, and also relatively easy to become a popular person online. This also applies to devotees who try to preach Krishna Bhakti. It seems to me that it may become sometimes difficult to have some discrimination, and we may sometimes mistake a real spiritual standing with the Krishna. Let's take that one next week. It's a bit long even to read out. We're already quite a bit over time. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
The chance for engaging me on this Sunday, and I hope to see you next week as well. Haribo.
Haribo. So just a couple quick announcements. First of all, happy birthday, Gokul Chandra. Is he here? Sadhvi, is Gokul with you? Let's see the birthday boy's face if he's here. Okay, he might not be, but anyway, it's his birthday, so send some, greetings for him if you feel like it. And the second thing, just a quick thing, is that next Thursday, Dayal Nitai is going to give a class called Mind Games, so that should be quite interesting. So I hope you guys can tune in, and let's meet up next Thursday again. Hari Hari Bol.